Okay. Well, thanks everybody for joining for our eighth book club this morning, number eight. Still can't believe it. This week we are covering the beginning of the 1968 trial in which Richard Kane and Willie Dodano were defendants against the government's charge of many charges. We'll go through the charges. The basis of part four is the trial transcript, which Carl asked me last night, where did you find this transcript? So some good detail to put in. I had access to it two different times. It's a huge file folder that is stored at the U.S. Archives on the south side of Chicago. So they had it there. Had to book an appointment. They had it all laid out for me. I had like a few hours at a desk to take notes. And then the second time I had access to it was Richard Kane's half brother, Michael Kane, who is a friend of mine now and wrote the book on his half brother, Richard. I visited him down in Roswell, Georgia in 2021, I think, and spent two nights at his house. And both nights I stayed up, till 3 or 4 in the morning. I took pictures of each page instead of photocopies and uh, eventually transcribed all those. So just a lot of memory taken up on my phone, but very worth the trip. I was down there in Georgia anyway. But anyway, so this will be a little bit different from our other readings, I think, because it's very legal. So very glad Jim is here. And that'll be good. So just a little bit different of a style, and we'll really kind of walk through it chronologically as we go along too. So I will share my screen here. If there's any questions or anything before we get started. Share screen, share screen. Maura Glover has entered. There she is.
I was wondering if you could maybe recap what has happened at this point on paper, like regarding the murder. Because obviously all these people try and damage the credibility of the witnesses by implying that they were involved in the Terry Zilligan murder.
Yeah,
So what's like legally the conclusion at this point in 1968 on that?
yeah, that's a great question. So the actual investigation is still open at this point. However, the lead detective at Dennis of Niles Police Department is pretty much the handler of the case, and anything that is not Paul Paintsco related, he has not wanted to hear about and will not want to hear about in the future. It's an open case. However, when the indictments came down in late 1967, indictment is like sort of initiates the whole case itself, brings the charges, arrests were made. Richard Kane began to, when he found out who would be testifying against him as a witness, try to poke some holes in their credibility, and their the whole defense's strategy is impeachment. They're trying to impeach the witnesses, which means like they're trying to smear them, make them like sort of uncredible and incredible to the jury. And so Richard Kane, going back to 67, he is aware of the possibility, maybe he's aware absolutely that LaJoy DiArgento and Shang were involved in the Gulf Mill Sears robbery, holdup, murder. And so he tries to get some folks to come out and speak out against them and get that investigation rolling again. Because if he can get LaJoy DiArgento and Shang on the hook for Sears, they're not going to be able to testify against him on the stand, or they'll be ruined as witnesses in the eyes of the jury against him, and he'll go off scot-free. So there was a point where Richard Kane wrote to Sears I don't have that letter. I know it exists as well through this trial transcript, but he wrote to Sears claiming the $20,000 reward that was put out by the corporation in 1964 because he had witnesses that could say that it was LaJoy and D'Argento and Shane. Those witnesses are Martin Tajra and Sam Felici, the two inmates at the jail. And then also there exists two
But
statements.
wait, I'm sorry, can you stop there? Why would Kane think he had those witnesses?
So he actually knew that they were well, so yeah, I guess that's a bit of a mystery, but where he found them, I would imagine that he was tipped off by somebody that they were, remember that Tajer and
Yeah.
Felipe had contacted every press corps, every like
Oh, okay.
outlet
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
about their information. And
Uh-huh.
so he was like, oh, okay. And then he wrote to Sears, wrote to John Shields, and then John Shields went to the jail to do the interviews. So
Okay, wait, yeah. So Kane wrote to Sears and
yeah.
then he wrote to John Shields.
Well, all I know is he wrote to Sears, but I would imagine that went right to John Shields.
Wow. So we may have Kane at the origin point of the tapes.
Yes, which is
Maybe
kind of
indirectly.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, thank you.
yeah.
So was
So
John Shields like being a good person and being like, I want to solve this, and it was because of Kane's request,
well, yeah, um,
probably.
yeah. Well, I think it's a little bit of both because I know the chaplain at the jail as well contacted Sears, so I think it was just kind of like all going
Oh,
at once. Another thing that Kane did was he alerted the police to a shooting range in the LaJoy Food Mart basement. And I don't know if you remember that news clip. It says hope to solve 1964 killing. And they talk about the slugs that were in LaJoy's basement. And they went to go test the ballistics with the bullet that was in Terry. And there was no match. That was definitely another Kane initiated thing in which he got the local police to go investigate that. So you've got sort of like the whole real premise behind a lot of this is, and the reason I give a lot of context to who Richard Kane is at this point in the story, do you think that he is somebody who is just so self-interested in saving his own skin that he's willing to just throw out all of these smoke screens everywhere and give everybody the runaround? Or is he just so involved and in touch and sort of knows and very smart, even representing himself, that he's putting these pieces together kind of on his own as this sort of agent of chaos? It's something I really want the reader, the audience to
Yeah,
try to piece together themselves with
right.
enough context because it could be either.
And
So
or it could be both because, I'm mindful of unless I'm misremembering, but Kane himself had a mob related murder in his family, right? His grandfather maybe was killed
yeah,
by the Black Hand.
yeah,
And so you have to, you could imagine that that is still one of the operating energies in his, not in everything he does, but certainly in something like this. Um, if he always had, some kind of trace of wanting justice for that, it might give, you know, motivation and energy to him really, really focusing in on this kind of in this particular murder. I mean, there's that list you give in the beginning of the of part four of all the convictions, not convictions, but all the charges that LaJoy had against him. And I mean, he could have pounded away on those, and that never really did. And there's like 11 or 12 charges that are pending that he was never convicted for, right? Or
Yeah, I would say murder obviously being one that's very like that would stick out to the jury that he's a
sure,
murderer, you know.
sure. But if
Um,
you're just trying to impeach credibility, just keep going down that list. Like, you can say you want rehabilitation. You have like
yeah,
such a long list. Like what are we going to make of that? And then just one day you decide you want to look at yourself in the mirror. It doesn't go.
right. So
Anyway,
let's
yeah.
get no, that's a good point. Olivia, I hope that answered somewhat. It's so basically it's an open case, and then this trial really and them being on the stand really kind of reopens things and is shaking things around in a way that, you know, is very, very interesting and I think telling. There's a lot of tea leaves that we can read about who's involved and what's going to happen with, or what does happen with Terry's case. So a lot going on here. And I was very surprised when I keyword searched, Terry Zilligan, and then all of a sudden it's like 1968. What is all this stuff?
Mhm.
So that's how I kind of, fell in and started following this, and it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, that helped a lot. Thanks for
Okay.
the
Okay, great. And
preface.
and any questions, just keep clarifying and I'll try to answer, not sound like a don't know what I'm talking about here.
Were you so shocked? We're going through the transcripts and you just kept seeing Terry Zilligan, Terry Zilligan, were you like dying?
Yeah, it was pretty crazy because
That
I knew I was the only person who's ever seen that in the family. So it was really, really weird to like read that first and be like reading about that and trying to figure out what happened. And then yeah, it was pretty shocking to see. But I'm also really glad like the archive still had the case, somewhere, and the transcript and all the files, because without actually reading it, then you just read the newspaper articles about it, and those are very telling, and they talk about it too, but without reading the actual words from the defendants and the lawyers and Hoffman, it's not the same. So yeah, pretty shocking.
Well, let me add too that so all this is going on, and then as you just said in response to Lydia, um, Lieutenant Dennis, it's going over his head. He's not, from Niles' police point of view, and really the whole Zilligan family point of view, they're still thinking about Peanuts Pansco.
Definitely, yeah, and he kind of reared his head in all of this as well when Richard Kane is, he's out on bond. He's trying to sort of figure out ways to attack these witnesses before the trial. And he went to the jail to visit Painsco. Of course, we don't know what was said in that meeting. I inferred a lot about what it would have been said. But given the fact that Painsco was in Dennis's sights, it would make sense that the conversation in, I believe, May of 68 before the trial between Kane and Painsco had to do with Sears in some way or another. Say, hey, I know you didn't do this. We know these guys did it. Can you
Right.
like supply any information about it at all or whatnot? And nothing ever seemed to come out of that because Painsco, never comes to the stand. I think Painsco was still very, never wanted to speak out against anyone in the outfit.
Yeah.
Although wink, wink, we'll see how long that lasts for him in his long tenure in the penitentiary. So
Uh-huh.
that seems to be the equalizer here to the mob's code of silence is how terrible the federal penitentiaries are
Yeah. Yeah.
from a
Mhm.
living conditions perspective. So um,
I
let's jump in.
wonder, sorry, really, I'm sorry, I don't
Yeah.
want to get stuck
No,
on
no,
this.
no, it's fun.
It's just fascinating because I wonder if like the media ever tried to contact Mary or ever, because they were like writing articles about this. And
Honestly,
I
good
don't
question.
think you guys like knew that this was going on and his name was brought up so much in the trial.
I
No,
don't
and my uncle said they never heard about it.
That's so crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But it
just-
was in the
just-
paper. I mean, it was everywhere. Somebody should have mentioned it.
Right.
A
Just
neighbor.
the
Yeah.
whole story where, about how you found out, Corey. It's just it's so mind blowing that it
Right.
had been an issue in the courts and all that stuff, but nothing ever came to you guys until
Right.
then,
Right.
until
Right.
it was in the paper.
Yep.
Yeah.
And even that was such a fluke, like if your dad hadn't decided to
Mhm.
read that article.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think so really the baseline of, again, this trial, that the logic just never ceases to blow my mind, is that LaJoy, D'Argento, Shang, and the others commit the crime with the gun in the bank, hold people up, traumatize them for life. But then they're going to get clemency for that, as long as they testify against the people who helped them cover it up and figure out who the rat was. That's Franklin Park bank robbery. It's all about Franklin Park bank robbery, which was 6 months before Sears. The biggest thing to remember here too from this chapter is that Hanrahan, who brought these indictments, has now stepped down from his post as U.S. attorney and is running and campaigning to be the Cook County state's attorney, which is, there's a different offices, different things to charge, but he has handed the reins over to Tom Ferran, who, is a able prosecutor as well, kind of similar background, who will be sort of the new Hanrahan, for all intents and purposes, on behalf of the U.S. Attorney's Office.
I hope we're pronouncing his name correctly.
Thank you. I don't know how either.
No, you're correct.
No,
Ferran.
it's just because he stopped that whole, really important part of the cross-examination to whine about how people
Yeah.
were pronouncing his name.
Mama, I got your joke.
I didn't get it, Mom.
Thank
That
you,
was really
kid.
good.
Thank you.
Very niche joke there. Cool. That was good. I was like, yeah, I don't really know.
So just to pause, because I was kind of stuck on this for a little bit. So I'm just going to say this out loud, what you just said, Tom. So this whole trial is trying to get Kane and D'Argento. Okay, wait a minute.
Kanan Dodano.
Dodano. Okay.
Mhm.
For trying to cover up, to try to cover up the bank robbery, trying to cover up the bank robbery and find out who the rat was. That's what the whole case is about, or
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Yep. And
Because covering up a bank robbery is a federal crime.
yeah,
Despite the fact, yeah, got
like
it.
accessory. I don't know. Jim, anything to add on the
Most bank robberies are federal crimes because of interstate commerce. If it's a small bank robbery, then it'll be done in a state court, but almost all of them are handled by the federal courts because it's again, interstate commerce banks are supplying money supply they're putting the money in supply, and so they're handled by the federals. And plus, that's how they would go after people like Dillinger. The FBI had far more resources than local sheriffs or local county prosecutors. So when bank robberies were more prevalent in the 30s and 40s, they were handled by those sorts of people.
Mhm.
U.S. government had far more resources than a local sheriff. So almost all bank robberies are federal cases.
But murders are state cases.
Yeah, there was no murder statute in the federal. In fact, that's how they got the guy that killed Kennedy. He was able to be assassinated. Osborne was able to be assassinated because he was not held in a federal penitentiary. He was held in a sheriff. There was no federal crime of murder until after that, after the not the Kennedy assassination, but the Osborne murder by, forget the guy's name.
Jack Ruby.
Ruby, that's right.
Uh-huh.
That's how Ruby was able to get him. He was not in federal custody. The
Oh,
thought being that murder should be defined by each of the states. Each state could decide how murder is, and it's actually different, how the states handle murders. It's across the board. It's handled 50 different ways.
Mm-hmm.
So at this time, there was no federal murder.
Yeah, which is it's very, I think that kind of that whole like, all right, if they have a federal clemency deal, can they, what was promised about a potential state murder investigation? And then, so they hint at that, but then it's like, so what happens in those circumstances if somebody gets, federal clemency, but they have state charges? So, does the state just kind of sort of wipe them clean? Are they willing to take a federal witness that risked everything to testify against, the mob or anybody
Sure.
to bring
Absolutely.
the charges? So there's that wrinkle, that gray area is really, prevalent in this whole trial here and what happened. So another thing with the timing of this is happening in September of 1968, 8 weeks before the general election. So take that how you will, but it's Hanrahan's name is all over the indictment and all over, the press around this. And then remember that Kane is tied to Richard Ogilvie, who's running for governor in 1968 on the
Okay.
Republican ticket. So good
So
Democrat,
theoretically,
bad Republican.
if Hanrahan wins state's attorney, he could dismiss any murder charges.
Correct.
Ah,
Correct.
That would be a hard one to do that. That'd be very, very difficult. He could do it, sure. Because he was be the state's attorney of Cook County, although that would be almost unheard of.
Okay.
No matter how significant the witness would be in a federal case, murder is it's still murder.
right. Okay, thank you.
All right. So yeah, another sort of layer of the trial is Judge Hoffman, who's, notorious federal judge, and I think most notoriously for the trial of the Chicago 7 case, which the happenings of which and the Democratic convention happened, a matter of weeks before this trial is going on. So, all of those folks, Abby Hoffman and Dellinger and all of them who were, arrested, were, soon to meet Julius Hoffman, but had not yet. And he was also the judge who did the Accardo case in 1959, the tax evasion that also involved Richard Ogilvie when Ogilvie was a prosecutor and prosecuted Accardo. So there's all these different webs still remaining here between all of these folks. So I thought that was interesting, and that, he's kind of given these very difficult, very public cases. I think he really liked the limelight. And so he's sort of, given these cases, whether it's random, not totally sure. It doesn't seem random to get these very high profile cases, but people are really starting to, I think attorneys are really starting to turn on him at this point and not think that he's fair or not in his right mind. He's getting pretty old. Well, he's 73 at this point, so, young to be president of our country, but maybe a little bit old to be judge. So, and then of course, just something that is just really unbelievable that happens at the beginning of this trial is one of the defendants tries to slit his wrists in open court. Johnny the Bug Borelli, who was really in charge of trying to root out the rat, just really, psychiatrically just not in a good place.
No.
And tries to hang himself and then tries to kill himself. I never could find out whatever happened to him, although, sorry, Johnny, a little bit irrelevant anyway. And, hope things turned out a little bit better for you. But
Yeah, that poor guy.
never
Yeah.
came back around and never found anything about him being attached to this any
Yeah.
further.
Okay.
So, um, blood everywhere to start. So it's a, this is going to be a crazy case. Jim, has that ever happened to you in court?
What?
Someone tried to slit their wrists, plead insanity.
No, no, I've seen people try to get out of, one guy jumped out a window, so I guess I didn't see this. But a guy jumped out a window of the 7th floor of 26th Street, and I suppose that's a suicide, or maybe he
Wow.
thought he'd sprout wings or catch a fire
Oh.
escape.
Wow.
And I've seen guys beat up, punch their clients in court, but I never seen a suicide.
Unreal. Yeah. Unbelievable. So yeah, so just opening arguments, got a few sketches from newspaper there, kind of show you kind of what the courtroom looks like and
Yeah.
who's sitting where. Kane made sure to distance himself there. And of course, everybody has a different lawyer. The DeLeggies have the same lawyer, but these different details come from the Chicago's American article and they covered this trial along with the Sun Times and Tribune too. But Chicago's American has some really good detailed descriptions of everything going on at the trial, and they were really just um, you know very descriptive
Hmm.
in their writing. So I thought it was good. And Kane being the star of the show.
Wow. Look at him even there. Yeah.
Yeah, and 43-year-old Kane, the former chief investigator for the former sheriff of Cook County, former top city vice cop, former anti-Castro freedom fighter, former everything that the balding little men who scribble TV adventure series could ever dream up for a hero to satisfy retired accountants and bank clerks and mailmen. Star of the show. I find myself unable to afford an attorney who would resist the political pressure of the case. I do not have a criminal indictment against me. I have a political
Yeah,
indictment.
I underlined that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then here are the counts. So conspiracy, bank robbery. I just can't read that from my accessory after the fact, misprision of a felony. And so that's pretty much the setup, and then get right into it with bringing Michael LaJoy to the stand. So he's the first to testify against the witnesses of 3. So LaJoy, DiArgento, and then Shang in that order. And this is just a really big moment, I think, for the case and everything. I've done some highlighting to really make sure that I hit some of the big points here. First thing that the defense establishes is that he's lied under oath before, that when he was arrested by the FBI, he said that the FBI had a gun and they were pointing it at him, which was not true. So, but then they, the government objects to that, and then Hoffman sustains it. So the jury is not able to remember that they just heard that he's lied before and committed perjury, but they've heard it.
Yeah, since we have Jim on, and you and Carla and I were talking about this yesterday, Becky, I'm sure and Maura and Olivia, you'll find this like interesting. It's something that we've all known for years and years and years and just never quite sits right. Here you have juries. So Jim, I'm sure this is happening. There's juries, they have eyes and ears. Then they're told disregard things, but they heard it and they saw it. So it becomes part of the strategy, even though they're formally told, forget it.
Yeah, it's called the unrung bell, and that
Good.
they'll ask a question like that to put it out there, and the judge will order them not to consider it. So when they go into the jury room, the foreman is supposed to say, we cannot consider that, and they can't talk about it. That's the foreman's job, to keep them from mentioning it. But
Okay.
it's out there. Now,
Yeah.
the question's not answered, but it's still out there and it may have some weight. In any particular juror's thought process, they'll find another reason to consider it. They can't mention it in their deliberations.
Uh-huh.
They certainly can't, they only go guilty or not guilty. So we don't know why the jurors do things, but
Yeah.
you ask a question like that and you got 4 or 5 jurors may consider it, even though they're not supposed to, when they'll keep their mouths shut in the deliberation. But
Yeah.
it can be a strategy, sure.
Have
And
you used that?
if it's a serious enough question,
Mm-hmm.
you'll have an automatic mistrial. Like, for example, a defendant has the constitutional right not to testify and not to incriminate themselves. And if any sort of question was asked about that,
Oh.
implying, well, if he was really innocent, he'd be up here, that'd be an automatic mistrial. So it'd never go to a jury. So there are safeguards.
Mm.
To answer your
So it's a
question.
dangerous strategy if you
Oh,
do
yeah,
that.
sure. Because if it's
Yeah.
significant enough, asking a
Yeah.
question like that, you could get a mistrial. And if the government asks a question like that, it could be double jeopardy if that jury's in there and sworn in. And so that trial could end right away.
Oh,
So,
wow.
but it does happen fairly often, and the jurors are told to disregard it. And do they disregard it? Probably not, but it can't discuss it. So it
Yeah.
stays in their minds, however they see.
Well, the metaphor of the unrung bell works for me.
That's the strategy, the unrung bell.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
That's great, Jim. Thank you so much. So yeah, and so even with that and the government objecting to it and Hoffman sustaining all the objections, they go through the facts that LaJoy's lied under oath. He's legally desperate. He has no appeals left. And there seems to be a deal in the works for clemency before the trial ends. He's got a hearing in a few days about his sentence that's, already on the court schedule. And Hoffman is sustaining again most or all objections. And then we get to the first mention of Terry in the trial here from Raymond Smith. So, in addition to the kidnapping, did you also commit the murder of that Sears employee and the robbery? Objection, sustained. Better. I don't know better. Why wouldn't the U.S. attorney want that question answered? I thought that was a really good line from
Yep.
Smith. And Foreign says, why doesn't he ask him whether he killed Robert Kennedy? It's outrageous. So just really trying to, make a case against, thinking about his or having the jury think about the murder in any way that's logical. So,
Well, I see another thing in there. Can I put that in? Is
yeah.
that, and I don't know Smith, but he seems really sharp and he's taking several of them are taking the same kind of strategy, the unrung bell strategy to try to discredit the witnesses. Is he also in a very subtle way, perhaps trying to impugn the government's honesty here? I find it strange that the government wouldn't want to know who killed Bobby Kennedy. Conspiracy, cover up, strange bedfellows, all kind of rise in the background.
Sure. I don't know. No, definitely. I think the question that Smith is saying is, did you commit the murder of that Sears employee? And then Foreign is like so outraged and he's like, well, why wouldn't you want that question? Why wouldn't you want to know if your witness has killed somebody?
Hyperbole.
What?
It's like a hyperbole. He's just being like,
Yeah.
oh, we might as well talk
Uh-huh.
about who Lincoln,
Yeah, but I see
Yeah.
what you're saying, like Robert Kennedy being like, if there's that some like conspiratorial or something like that.
Because that had just happened too.
Just happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Anyway, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
So there's two Callahans, but there we have the George, I think, moves for a mistrial. And I think that's what Jim was just referring to, that kind of.
Yeah. And then Hoffman can deny that motion. Right. So, just really, really tight window to try to impeach these witnesses or get a mistrial, and they're just, really, it's really tight. It's basically closed from the outset. Hoffman draws this sort of red line and continues to want them not to cross it, and then brings up that if you want to have an offer of proof outside of the presence of the jury, he could allow it. The difficult part about these offer of proofs, and Jim, sorry I'm keeping you busy here, is you give the offer of proof outside the presence of the jury, and then the uh prosecutor can say, no, we don't want the jury to hear that, and then the judge can uphold that objection. Said that wrong, but
No, that's correct. You got it. It's an offer of proof is. It's something that you're not sure if you don't want to have a mistrial. So you say, I want to ask these certain questions, and then the judge will say no, and the jury never gets to hear. So it's a way to not unrung the bell because it's a significant questions that you're asking about. That's correct.
okay, so they don't want a mistrial, so they do it outside of the presence of the jury. But like, in what circumstance would the prosecutor say, okay, yeah, though the jury can hear that? I mean, I just can't believe that they get the deferment, and it's not up to the judge to say, if the offer of proof is relevant or not. That it's up to the prosecutor.
Well, yeah, a lot of times the offer of proof come after an objection. So somebody will say, Mr. Witness, isn't ABC true? And then there'll be an objection, and then it'll be sustained. And then you ask for a sidebar, and then you say, Your Honor, here's why I'm asking the question. This is why ABC is relevant. And then the judge will either, reverse himself and allow it in, or just say no, objection will remain sustained.
Okay. And that is all done voir dire, right? Voir dire.
Voir dire.
Voir
Yeah,
dire.
it's well, the sidebars and these offers of proof are all done outside of the jury because it's lawyers explaining why they want to ask a certain question that the judge has not has sustained. But so you can't do you can't talk about all this stuff in front of a jury because the jury's not supposed to hear it. So the defense attorney asks, or the prosecutor asks a question, it's objected, it's sustained, and then you go in front of the judge. Judge, this is why I want to ask this question. Now, none of that can be done in front of the jury because that would be unringing a lot of bells. You would have, that'd be all prejudicial stuff the jury would hear.
Okay. Thank you. And then, yeah, it's just amazing. I think, Carla, to your point, like being shocked about reading this for the first time. The time I was like really the most shocked was to see a Kane and LaJoy back and forth, because I had never really, could even imagine them interacting. And then Kane just starts it off with, "Good afternoon, Monsieur LaJoy." I just think that is just, he is just so wild. Hard to believe it's a real person.
But in my opinion, Kane does like a way better job than all the other attorneys combined, because he's just so like what's the word, like scrappy,
He knows them, like he
Yeah.
knows
He knows
their
them.
histories
Yes.
more.
Yes.
and he has the excuse of, oh, I'm not a lawyer, I didn't know I couldn't say that. And like, I don't know. And whenever I hear that someone is representing themselves, my mind is just like, oh, they're a narcissist because they just don't think anybody else can do a better job. But honestly, he did a better job. I think he did well for himself because, like you said, Baki, he knows them. He knows in my opinion, he knows the truth of what happened because he heard about it from the inside. And so he just wants it to come to light for himself.
And he just knows their character. So there's all this bullshit about I'm rehabilitating and oh my God, I want to do better. I want to go to school. He knows that's all bullshit.
That is so coached.
Yeah. Yeah.
Terrible.
You can't bullshit a bullshitter. I think it's he's the top bullshitter. And I think, but I think his logic on the rehabilitation is so good here too, because he's like, oh, you want to rehabilitate yourself? Yeah, by coming clean, I'm going to
Yeah.
rehabilitate. Oh, so do
Okay.
you believe to rehabilitate yourself, you should come clean about all of your crimes? Wouldn't that
Yes.
fully
Right.
rehabilitate
Yeah.
you? And then it's like, no, 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 objection, objection, objection.
Yeah.
But yes, I mean, like, hopefully that, I was, of course, we, it doesn't really stick, but it's like you'd hope a jury would be like, oh yeah, that's pretty weird that I have to trust this guy with everything else seemingly going on in the background, and what he hasn't copped to. And then also, uh, if you're true and sincere and attempting to rehabilitate yourself, do you care to testify as to what crimes you have committed that you have not been indicted for? He will have to see his clergyman about that, is what Hoffman says. So, and then also, this is great, just like he knows them, right? He knows how, they're pretty dim-witted fellas. So he's
Yeah.
like, no one told you to use the words proceeded, exterior, and presumption? Because because again, LaJoy
Yeah.
and DiPageno, they cling to the fact that they've never rehearsed with the U.S. Attorney's Office. They've never rehearsed their answers. They say that time and time and again. Nope, never. We've talked about my testimony, but we've never rehearsed. So trying to, perjure them there too. That like, really, those words. I think these also kind of trying to get under his skin there too.
Yeah.
Um, and uh, and then being concerned about his family, um, you know, and getting the cash payments for his family. And again, that was they received an unprecedented amount of cash from the federal government, um, when they decided to turn, into witnesses. They were getting a lot of money compared to, previously. One of the FBI agents, and I know that because one of the FBI agents says, no, I've never seen, witnesses get that amount before.
Wow.
So quite a big chunk there. Closer we get to the present, the worse your memory becomes, but you can remember exceedingly well concerning 5 years ago. This is another thing here that I don't know, just reading into this more and more, I just found this very interesting. Have you ever been to Mr. Hanrahan's home? No. Have you ever been to Mr. Ferran's home? No, sir. Have you been to an FBI agent's home? No, sir. Did Mr. Hanrahan ever discuss politics with you? I don't believe so. So like, no, sir, no, sir, no, sir. I don't believe so. So I don't know that I wasn't that we're not there, but just looking at that's a weird shift. Because he says it again, on this note, I don't believe so. When he's being asked about Hanrahan's run for state's attorney, says it again, and then goes back to no, sir, here. So I don't know. This just like looking at the tea leaves, but it's just
Mhm.
another little,
Yeah. Yeah.
piece there that I just, I don't believe so doesn't sound like no, sir, to me.
Right.
And then they come right back to Sears here. When you were talking with Mr. Hanrahan, did he discuss the fact that the government had a substantial amount of evidence concerning the murder at Sears Roebuck? Objection. This was not objected to. Did Mr. Hanrahan ever say there was evidence against a murder case? No, sir. And then Hoffman says, if you have, evidence of a conviction of this witness, we'll be glad to take it up at an appropriate time. I mean, I wish that were true. I don't, nothing ever became of that, but um, so Kane is kind of plays dumb and says, I'll do an offer of proof later. But then charges right back into the same line of questioning. He says, Mr. LaJoy, were you ever shot in the leg? Because if you remember, the GIMP being the telling characteristic of the shooter at Sears. They said that Paintsco had a GIMP. LaJoy also, believed the testimony of, Martin Tajra, who was, his cellmate.
Right.
He said that he was shot in the leg after trying to steal money from an associate after a bank robbery, tried to, take some money off the top, and they taught him a lesson, shot him in the leg, and he didn't play ball with them in the yard,
Mhm.
at certain times, or, had trouble walking too far in the yard because of his leg. So they are, Kane knows that too, and is trying to bring that up.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, talking about LaJoy's preference for a 38 caliber pistol, and just continuing to go down the path of, did the police in Niles, Illinois ever accuse you of murdering a man with a 38 pistol? So I'll have to look back on that and see if they ever knew what kind of gun was used. I don't think that would be the case if they knew the exact kind of gun that was used and they had the bullet from Terry, but um, seemingly there's a connection there that, Kane's trying to make. So presumably it would have been a possibility. Um, and kind of to what Mike said here, the folks in the gallery, he knows so much about them. He investigated them to begin with. He goes in and dirties up the government witnesses. Then the big lawyers take over. The media was also awestruck by Kane. Kane could be almost anything. The young company executive with the good marketing ideas, the stock market quotations, water, I don't know what that means, even just a trace, the well-tailored man on the Via Veneto who suggests perhaps Madame could join him for Cinzano. I don't know what that means. Completely foreign language to me, but I kind of get the point.
I think, Carla, you had a point about Kane's cross-examination, and it is pretty good. I have to state, you can impeach a witness, any witness, with a felony conviction, but you can't get in there and impeach somebody for committing a murder if they haven't been convicted of it. Otherwise, you would just have all these unrung bells and accusations flying left and right through these things. So, going back to you, Carl, I think that's it's pretty. Kane's not a dummy asking these questions. I mean, he didn't have the conviction of the Sears robbery, but he certainly knows why he's bringing these questions up to try to dirty this witness up against him.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Like, you can't, but so I think, really trying to make the jury uneasy about believing these guys, even if it's not like a full impeachment, like a formal impeachment, but more of like an informally, like, you really going to buy these guys? I mean, they're the ones with the guns at the bank to begin with. And now, we're gonna talk about, I'm so curious of what the jury was like in this case and what they talked about, and what they did think was relevant and what not. I mean, must have been, a, a pretty uneasy environment in that jury room.
Now, is that all oral and there's no record ever of jury deliberations?
Oh no, it's always secretive.
Okay.
Unless you've seen the movie 12 Angry Men, that's the only jury that we know how they deliberated.
Mm-hmm.
No, they don't keep a record of it at all. In fact, they can't, because
Yeah.
that's the jury's domain. It's
Okay.
their power. It's what they
Mhm.
have.
It's what they have. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
To me, this like whole back and forth with Kane and LaJoy, it just to me is more proof that LaJoy shot Terry, because it's just he's so adamant and so confident about it. It's just, I mean, I know that he could just be using that for his own motivations, but it's just like he knows it. He's got him. He's just using it. So it's just, to me, it's more proof.
Mm-hmm.
I would say too, just, I mean, to that point, and if I could add like a layer onto that, is like, think of all the other crimes and murders, that even if they were pulling one out randomly to pin on these guys, why would they pick Sears? I mean, why would they pick, Terry's case? It's so specific. And so, I mean, yeah, they were sort of involved in it, but like it doesn't seem like it would have been. It seems too random.
Well, and it's not as safe as like the rap sheet that he has, which they could go after, right?
Yeah,
It's very interesting why he does that.
yeah,
Yeah, like if he wasn't sure about it, it's a big,
Yeah.
it's a big
Well, and
risk.
maybe Kane has been helping him cover that up or
Yeah,
help them cover that up for a long time. And he
yeah,
knows a lot more about it. And they
mhm,
know he knows.
exactly.
yeah. I would say this. So then they do the offer of proof with Raymond Smith. So, presenting evidence, even if it's kind of an impossible hurdle here. So outside of the presence of the jury. Um, and I guess another thing too is like there's press in the gallery too. So, it's not completely valueless if the jury doesn't hear it. If the press hears about this and maybe reports on it too. So,
There's
there's
a point.
some value in that too. But so were you arrested for the murder of a Sears Roebuck employee in 1964? Yes, sir. So that is actually the first time that I confirmed from, you know, his mouth directly that LaJoy was arrested for the Gulf Mill Sears uh, murder. That for
And we
Terry,
still don't know who called in that tip.
right, right, to get him to be arrested.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, uh, but that's the first because there's no arrest record in the Niles files or anywhere else that says Michael LaJoy was arrested. And again,
Not good.
said
Not
this,
good.
well, it's
Yeah.
yeah, it doesn't exist at all. And the only arrest records that do exist relate to Paul Paintsco and then like
Wow.
the evidence and things like that. So he was arrested, says he's, released the same day. Are you aware there's a continuing investigation, which again is very spearheaded by Kane in this trial, but it's still going on and there's still new things happening. And then says that, newspaper article came out. The the newspaper article that I referenced earlier, the Hope to Solve 1964 killing about the slugs, the FBI who was protecting LaJoy and housing him at the time brought him the article and they were like, what the hell is this? Are you involved in some murder charge too? So at that point, the FBI does know about a possible, connection between LaJoy and a murder charge. And he just tells them, nope, I was arrested. Nothing ever happened. And apparently that was enough for them or, what have you. But so this also shows that the FBI was very aware about this connection in the beginning, and obviously continued down the path that they were already on. So held for several hours. Explained to them I was arrested for it. I was interrogated. I did a show up, which I don't know if he actually did a show up, but that's very interesting. I was held in custody for several hours and then I was released. So yeah, just a lot of different details here as well too coming out from just the questioning of Kane. So um, they didn't show you or bring statements from two of your employees to whom you confessed the robbery and killing. Those statements I do not have either, unfortunately. However,
And had we ever heard of this before?
no, no, no. So there are in the course of from the 1967 indictment to this trial, there are four people who come forward and say something about LaJoy being the killer. There's Martin Taja, Sam Felici, and then there's these two employees of the LaJoy Food Mart who say that he confessed to them. And actually, they gave him an alibi on March 14th, and then apparently recanted that alibi and said, no, he actually was not in the store at that time, but told us to say that. I really, really want those statements. I don't have them. They're not part of any kind of like court file or anything, but that is, what we can glean that those two witnesses said from this transcript. So I think that's pretty crazy. And then when you came back, when you returned to your store on Taylor, 1000 South Loomis on March 14th, after you were out in the morning, did you burn a mask and gloves in the sink in the rear kitchen? Did you take a pistol down to the basement? Did you confess to the murder and robbery of your cellmates in the Cook County Jail? Did you ask Sam Felici to kill a judge for you while you were in there? You didn't ask him to murder Judge White. I mean, the details are so specific.
Had we heard of that before?
No.
Still new stuff. Wow.
Yeah. Still new stuff. So these are all things that, Kane is bringing to the fore here and, holding his feet to the fire. And
what a weird guy to have as kind of a hero right now, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And kind of makes you squeamish to all of a sudden be rooting for him after everything we know about him. And it's kind of like it's like you see that in like a movie or something, like the villain does the right thing all of a sudden, and you're like, okay, yeah, but like,
I asked Tom this, but you guys think of it and put your answers in the chat. Who plays Kane in the movie? I yield.
I said Colin Firth. I think that looks very similar to Colin Firth, but we'll see. So then yeah, he Kane still kind of plays dumb here, but the government objects to the offer of proof, and then Hoffman sustains the objection so that jury comes in, and then they recess for the weekend. But all that happens, big sparks about the Sears investigation, and then it's just not heard by the jury. And then, as Carla mentions, just the fact that, Kane as an untrained lawyer really, I think, breathed some serious life back into Terry's case during the course of the trial is
my God. Like, he's the only person. Without him, we would all still be in 1964 at Peanuts Pants Go.
Is that James?
Hi, everyone.
Hey, James. Hi, sweetie.
James. Are you guys having so much fun?
Yeah, we're having a great time.
Did you golf well yesterday?
Yeah, I played all right.
Just all right.
We just played 9 holes.
Attaboy.
Who's in this?
Carla, Corey, Jim.
Oh
wow.
I'm Mike. I'm Tom and Carla's half brother.
Okay.
And this is James Tiro, PJ and Kathy's youngest boy.
JT. James the Bames.
All right. I'll let you guys get back to it.
Good
Join
meeting you.
us
Happy
whenever.
golfing.
Join us one day, yeah.
Yeah, maybe I will.
You see, I was trying to point to you guys because this
Like
is where
the
you
Brady.
are, and Tom is above me, Carl's below me. I have no idea where you are oriented in your grids. So anyway,
So yeah, just a lot you could say about the Kane aspect here. I think this is really, big fireworks early in the trial. But again, do you think Richard Kane is pulling this stuff out and, just trying to save himself and there's no real truth for it and just trying to cobble things together? Or is there truth behind it and he's trying to save himself? Is just is a question that, is just lingering there. And then LaJoy just, continuing to just plead ignorant and, say, oh, I just never rehearsed anything. I'm just trying to rehabilitate myself. Yeah, I got money for it. And yeah, my life's not in danger anymore. But like, yeah, just really along for this ride after, not, doing that for many, many years. It's hard to stomach. Even if you don't think that he was the trigger man in the Sears murder, Terry's murder, even if you don't think that he's the trigger man, it's still incredibly unsettling. So, I think, as they say here, in the Sun Times, LaJoy conceded with a candor that seemed to startle the jury. So the jury is a little bit taken aback by, him talking about the crimes he's committed in the past, but certainly not enough to see him as somebody who is probably not a super credible witness or what have you, or someone you want to listen to. But so anything else on LaJoy and Kane? I don't want to keep beating the horse here. We got some other stuff to get to, but just a lot of yeah.
I'm curious, Tom, you said you spent time with Michael Caine. Like, to me, it seems like there's probably some truth and some legitimacy to what he's saying, but it's 100% in his own self-interest, not necessarily in like a pursuit of justice. But what did his half brother have to say about this?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah. Good question. So a few things. So the first time I reached out to Michael Caine was I had read his book that he wrote about Richard Caine, and I, had some questions about this. This is partially in there that he wrote about, the trial within the book, and reached out to the publisher, and they put me in touch with him, which was awesome. So shout out to Skyhorse Publishing for just giving me direct access to one of their authors. But he said, as far as the trial goes, there was very, very, very little evidence against Richard Caine to begin with. So the only connection is Witzman to, his partner Witzman, who ran the lie detector tests. There's just really, really little amount of evidence in the trial itself. So it was kind of, a political trial. And when I mentioned to him, who I was and why I was interested in the trial, Michael's first reaction was, oh, well, it's a state case. So this was a federal case, so the state murder charges wouldn't really factored in. Don't really follow your logic. And I was like, okay, all right, like I appreciate that. And then about like a month later, he sent me this like really long text, and he was like, no, I think you're dead. I think you're right. Like, I think you're onto something. I think, this definitely probably played a hand in that. And I'm sure that, because they were so dead set on getting Richard, that they would have, given LaJoy and DiArgento anything they wanted in terms of clemency. So got him on board eventually. But at first he was a little bit like, oh, I don't know. I'm not sure about that connection. But just given all that, he is aware of too, he's on board with it and has been a really great supporter of this research, and a really good friend.
That's awesome.
And he loves Guinness and Irish whiskey, so get along great.
You guys, I'm so sorry. I have to sign off now.
Thank you,
Thanks for joining us,
Mosey.
Mom.
Great to see you, baby.
Love you.
Maura.
All right.
Bye,
Love you.
Mosey.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Cutie girl.
So yeah, Caine said, I want to go into LaJoy's murder confession to see that these witnesses so I can prove he is not capable of telling the truth, impeach him as a witness. Was this a miscarriage of justice, or was it all another Richard Caine ruse? is really the question. And then second day, nothing really happens much when LaJoy is on the stand. They kind of just continue to, repeat this. When did you become mindful of your obligation to your family? Is a great line from George Callahan. Then,
Yep.
I'm trying to help myself, trying to help my family. Oh, when did you become mindful that you were, of your obligation to your
Yeah.
family? While you were out on bond, and you went out and committed several more crimes. So, and then, I have hopes that my sentence will be reduced. Not, hey, there's a deal in the works. I have hopes that it'll happen. Just want to rehabilitate myself, just more of the same. And then release from the courtroom on that second day. And that's the last that we'll hear of from LaJoy during the trial. But yeah, the jury was expected to believe that in a moment of moral triumph, LaJoy had a good heart and the best of intentions.
My God.
Is really what they're trying to push here.
Big bombshell on this page.
Yeah. Here's, you mean in 61?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So 90 years of potential jail time for DiArgento is at stake here. 90 years for all of these different crimes. And just a lot of difficulty. And then of course we discover why this is called intangible things.
Mhm.
Big
Which
bombshell. Big bombshell.
big bombshell. Yeah, I guess that's kind of funny. I don't really I know what this comes from, but it must sound like a weird title to other people, but it is a direct line from Joseph DiArgento. That, again, back to the posterior and all of those words that these fellows probably don't know. I don't think intangible is a word that they necessarily know either.
Quite.
Um,
Yeah.
were you so I guess why don't we read through this actually? Mr. DiArgento, you have testified yesterday afternoon. Mike, why don't you be DiArgento, okay? Since you love.
Oh yeah.
All right. Mr. DiArgento, you have testified yesterday afternoon. You have testified this morning. Has your testimony been the truth?
Yes, sir.
Were you promised or given anything at all for your testimony?
I was given
What were you given?
intangible things.
I didn't hear that.
Intangible things.
I'm sorry, I still didn't hear that. Read the answer, Mr. Porter. What sort of intangible things?
Intangible things. Courage, faith, hope, many things.
Who gave you these intangibles, Mr. DiArgento?
Men that have been working with me, prosecution agents.
And how long have you been working with prosecution agents, Mr. DiArgento?
Well, I mean, not working with them. I mean, it turned informer.
Has turning informer given you faith and hope and so on?
Well, they gave me the very air I'm breathing right at the present time.
Is the air you are breathing, is that air better than the air you were breathing in the penitentiary?
My life was in danger in the penitentiary. I'm glad to have air at all. That's all.
Were there any promises made to you, Mr. DiArgento, by anyone associated with the government?
No, sir.
In what manner was hope instilled into you by the prosecutors you are working with?
Well, I believe if a man does right, he can't go wrong.
Do you believe that you will have to go back to the penitentiary on conclusion of your testimony?
That may be so.
Were you ever told that it may be you will not have to go back to the penitentiary on conclusion of your testimony?
No, sir.
Aside from the hope that was given to you and the faith, have you been given anything of a more tangible nature?
No, sir.
Great job, Mike. And you get the
Thank
part.
you.
You get the
Yeah.
part. But the back and forth there always like struck me that, he, of course, the intangible thing of the clemency deal, just it's not necessarily in writing. It's just I'm just working off of hope here. I think that line just really has always that stuck out to me immediately, that that's all he was doing this for, but not the more tangible thing of clemency and of not being convicted and tried for all these different crimes, including Sears, is really why that phrase is the working title of the project. No immunity deal, no expunge record, no money, no protection is what he's claiming.
Mm.
Obviously that all does exist. Those are tangible things that he does have.
Yeah.
His testimony was so true that he could rehabilitate himself, free his tormented soul from a lifetime of guilt. Was this true, or was he really just given the courage to testify against the outfit without retribution, faith in Hanrahan and the feds to set him free, and the hope to never go back to the penitentiary where he would either go mad or be killed? None of which would be intangible things, but the phrase sounded nice and innocent to the jury. And then, perjures himself, I think, a couple times here by saying that he does not know who Sam Felici and Martin Tasher are.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, pretty crazy for you to not know the barn boss on your cell block. So just completely denying that he even knows them, is not true. And and then Tom Ferran calls Richard Kane Perry Mason, just trying to play Perry Mason in the courtroom. I've never seen Perry Mason, but I did look it up for this. I guess he's trying to finger a witness as the actual perpetrator of the crime, but that was a interesting, entertaining back and forth there. And then Hoffman saying, the truth about some things are not material in every case. I mean, he is correct in a sense there, but from a legal perspective, but morally, I'm not sure that's
Right.
That's true. So
Yeah, that really indicted him in my eyes,
yeah, and then did you discuss your testimony with Hanrahan? No. Did anybody ever say you'll be immune from future prosecution? No. I mean, that's just so false. It cannot be true. I mean, that's my opinion. I'm trying to add so much for being objective, obviously, but it's so hard to believe that he's just never talked about anybody about his testimony, and he's just doing it with all of the implications at hand. With the outfit already looking to kill him and putting kind of the word out to kill these guys if they see them. And then Kane also asked about any future prosecution from the state given your testimony, which would include the murder charge of Terry. And then DiArgento says, I never murdered anybody. I beg your pardon, I was never threatened. I asked if you were threatened, not if you ever murdered anybody. So DiArgento's trying to be upfront about that. I never murdered anybody. Kind of understands where Kane is going there.
Mm-hmm.
And then
technically he did. He didn't. At least
right.
in
Right.
64. Yeah.
Right. Very, very true. Yeah, of course.
Although he instigated it by saying, allegedly saying to LaJoy, do something here.
Yeah. Were you told that if you did not say certain things in this courtroom that you would be prosecuted for the murder of Terrence Zilligan at the Sears Roebuck store in 1964? No, sir. And then Ferran does not object to that. And Kane continues. Maybe he just sort of fell asleep. But DiArgento says, I don't even know Terrence, whatever the person's name is. And then he says, again, I told you I was given intangible things so I can look myself in the mirror for justice, for society, for the courts. And then, I don't feel as if I am an animal anymore. never rehearsed my testimony though, which, okay. And then it says, did anybody go over your testimony with you? They asked me questions about it. I answered the questions they gave me. Okay. Well, are they asking you what you like, what your favorite dessert is? No, they're asking you questions about how you're going to say things and, et cetera. I just find it really hard to believe that the U.S. attorney did not coach their witnesses, which is what they're trying to continue to say.
Yeah. And
then,
there he is.
yeah. So, and then Kane brings up the fact that when Guy Loverboy Mendola was murdered, Kane took over that investigation and brought in to the left, there's Peanuts Painsko. In the middle, that's Joseph DiArgento. And then on the right is someone else. It's James D'Antonio too, but kind of irrelevant. But saying, hey, well, don't you have something against me? I interrogated you about a possible murder. I think you hold that against me. And then Kane says, I wish to show that he's been under investigation for several murders for the past several years. And the government has evidence concerning these murders. Another thing I want to just get to about this photo, which, is right outside of Richard Kane's office. They're waiting to go into Richard Kane's office in 1960. This would have been September of 64, about Mendela's murder. And I mean, who looks nervous there? I don't know. I think one person looks a little nervous. The other two look pretty unenthused and bored. But Kane, again, just being Mr. Call the press when he's trying to do something big, would have called the press to see that he was looking into these guys and, just they're right outside his office. One thing to just kind of throw a little more intrigue into all this is I'd mentioned my conversations with the former Cook County Sergeant John Flood in the past as well, who arrested Painsko and sort of avoided him being shot down by Niles police and Chicago police. He actually said that he thinks that Guy Mendola, Loverboy Mendola, was killed by Kane. And he said that's what I think, because Kane made a big showing of arresting all these guys. He took over the investigation unilaterally.
wow.
So that's like a theory out there too. The other being that it was, the Sears guys who, did the job. That's I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole, but that's something there.
Guys,
Okay.
I gotta jump off too. My dad's picking me up right now.
Okay.
All
Yeah.
right, Beatsy. Bye, honey.
All right. Love you guys. Love you
I
all.
love you.
Thank you for a great book club. I
Yeah,
think we need
thank
to
you.
do a reading of the transcripts every time. That was the highlight.
Yeah, that was really big.
All right. Love you guys.
Bye,
Love you
sweetheart.
too.
Bye.
But this was a great meeting. These chapters were really riveting.
Yeah.
Thanks, Olivia. Thank you so much for being part of it. James too. You guys go do your thing. Enjoy. Get to the
All right.
something. All right.
All right, guys.
Take care.
Bye. Hey, hi, Andrew.
Boys.
Bye, guys.
Hey Jim, can I ask you something just while we're here about and this is something from my dad too, because I asked my dad, what could have Hoffman done if he thought, if he heard all this discussion about a murder, could he have examined the claims in camera? Can you talk about what in camera means?
In camera is the same thing as out of the presence of the jury. It's normally done in the judge's chambers. The judge would go off the bench, go into his back room, and both sides would come in there, and then they go through all of it, just like this. Usually with a court reporter, So in camera is really no different than a sidebar. It's just because it's a lot longer. They would go back into a private room to discuss that stuff. So it's the same as a sidebar. It's just with more detail because it's a 10-minute argument as opposed to 90 seconds at the side of the jury.
Okay,
That's all
I
it is.
see. I see. So yeah, so I mean, Hoffman's telling everyone to disregard the claims, but then he's like, I think as a federal judge, he's could, pull some strings and try to get, some investigation going there. And then this one was just very, very surprising to find as well that on the night of the 16th after LaJoy and DiArgento's testimony, J. Edgar Hoover gets a direct update about how the witnesses are doing on the stage. So
My
the
God.
special agent in charge sends the memo. Ferran feels LaJoy's direct testimony was very good. No indication that Smith or Kane have destroyed his credibility. DiArgento underwent vigorous cross-examination, held up well. Bureau will be kept advised. And again, Hoover just having his tentacles everywhere, just wanting to stay updated about this, and um, kind of gone into the history of the FBI turning their attention domestically to the outfit. This was a big case.
Well, and back to your question about, is anybody going to follow up on these repeated, assertions about the Sears murder? If Hoover is being kept personally apprised, the answer is no,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Wouldn't he be able to squelch anything like that?
Yeah. A good point. Yeah, very much so. It's kind of quite a bit of influence there
Dear God. Dear God.
across the board. So this is a little background on James Parsons. Before sort of the case was heard again on the 17th. There was a bond hearing for LaJoy. I'm sorry, was it for DiArgento?
Mhm.
And then it was stayed another 30 days, but again, they're on the schedule. There's another judge that could probably step up here, but he was the presiding judge in the Franklin Park bank robbery, and is now kind of ruling on their sentences,
On their
etc.
sentencing. Uh-huh.
This was a random thing that I found about Ronald Reagan and Starved Rock.
So interesting. Yeah.
That's something I just can't believe. But talking with Ronald Reagan, realized it was Reagan who saved him from drowning in the 20s at Starved Rock State Park.
Wow.
Oh yeah. Oh, now I know why the president looks familiar. He saved my life. So yeah, just another
But so you're saying like Parsons would also have been somehow given some kind of, if not warning, just like, hey, if you could just sort of continue that while we're moving on in this court and the next courtroom, that'd be great.
I think he
Maybe.
yeah, I can't say for sure, but I think he's just
Right.
sort of part of the larger, thing going on here.
Yeah, it looks like it, right.
Yeah.
Just
Because
keep pushing that off, push it off, push it off.
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then just knowing these criminals very well and being in the trial of Franklin Park, just
Right.
able
So
to
they're guilty, but the sentencing, does that change their status as witnesses then? Is that what the issue is? Or they just don't want it to all be closed?
They are still kind of waiting for the testimony to be over to actually like commute the sentences, I believe.
Oh, okay.
So I think they, they scheduled it for them to
Yeah.
do
Back
it,
burner.
but yeah, now they're just, it's in the works.
Mhm.
But yeah, so again, DiArgento references the PACE program at the county jail indirectly about trying to rehabilitate himself and go back to school here. And then, you know, exactly what Hanrahan said to him, you know, your intentions are go to school. Why don't you want to rehabilitate yourself, face yourself, make something yourself, do the right thing? So Hanrahan really having, you know, obviously like being the key, you know, pot stirrer on getting these witnesses. And then just one other thing to point out before we wrap up is just like, D'Argento says courage, faith, and hope in that order again. You know, just clinging to the talking points over and over. That's really all he's working off of: courage, faith, and hope, and don't stay off. You know, stay on those talking points. No set deal, nothing in writing, etc. So, yeah, I think that pretty much says it for this section. I mean, D'Argento kind of goes on, and they really can't do much. You know, Kane accuses Ferran of making baseball signals to him.
Oh my God.
But it's really kind of a last ditch effort there. And then, yeah, essentially, Shang will be next on the stand, but that kind of wraps up our time here. And I know our numbers are dwindling, so thank you three for still hanging and being on the YouTube.
Love it. Love it.
But
Thank you, Tom.
It's fascinating your study of history and putting this all together, and it just puts chills in my spine when I hear the witness D'Argento saying, "I don't even know Terrence or whatever his name is." I mean, that's
Right. Me too.
no, you're reading this stuff from 1968 about a real person to all of us, and he's, you know, the reference to him, and it just it's shuddering. It's
Yeah.
you know, so real, this stuff coming out.
Yeah.
It's amazing how this was all
I
uncovered.
felt the same way, Jim, about LaJoy talking about, well, you know, I think about my family and they need to really be taken care of. And oh yeah, your family.
Yeah, well, which
Yeah.
family is he referring to?
Right. You know, I found that really hard to get past.
Right. Well, thanks for getting us together. Who are you rooting for, Tom?
As an Irishman, I can't root for England, so you know,
Yeah.
yeah, but then I
Spain.
ended up having to get I got a tea time anyway, so I'm not really gonna be able to watch much of the game. But
Oh, I thought you
yeah,
were.
I was, and you know, but so thanks for meeting a little bit earlier this week, and then
Oh, it's
I'll text in the chat too about our next meeting too.
okay.
Maybe we'll even do something in person if you guys would be interested in that, and maybe read
Yeah,
that
that'd be fun.
trial together.
Yeah.
Or you know, we'll stick to Zoom if since it's just so easy. So
Well, you know what might be nice is maybe when you wrap it all up to meet in person, just kind of because it's been so enjoyable. And yes, I do like the Zooms, but you know, we could you know, as we close out the book club, maybe meet in person. Just an idea.
that's
It's a good
one.
idea.
Yeah, that's a good one for sure.
Mhm.
So I'll send out like maybe what we're gonna read next and when we'll meet next and discuss it. But thank you guys for being here so much.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, thank you,
input.
Tom.
Love you. All right.
Great
Take care,
seeing you all the
Bob.
other
Take
night
care,
as
Jim.
well.
Yes.
Take care.
Love
See
you
y'all
guys.
later.
Okay.
Bye,
Love you
darling.
too.
Bye bye.